look for the long suit. Look for the long suit and play it. Um, I think that I think that's one thing. And what is the long suit, and what can you do with it
Hmm.
to contribute? What contribution can you make with it? Is the question, because that I think is where ultimately satisfaction in life comes from.
Welcome back to the Own Your Awkward podcast. I'm your host, Andy Vargo, and every episode we get into what has made our guests vulnerable and how they've learned how to own their awkward in order to live their best life. Stay tuned so you can hear every awkward moment in today's show.
Hey, friends, welcome back to another awesome show of the Own Your Awkward podcast. Today, I am really excited to introduce you to someone I just met recently, getting to know and learning a lot from, Michael Fowler. Michael, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So Michael Fowler is the executive director of the World Trade Center in Tacoma, as well as the principal at Asia Access Inc., and doing lots of great things, bringing the stuff we're doing here around the world. Michael, it's been a pleasure to get to know you, and I'm really excited to hear you own your awkward today.
Well, the pleasure's mine, Andy.
Well, before we get to hear about your awkward, you're so in touch with things all over the world. What do you see right now as the most positive thing out there?
Well, the best thing what the pandemic, was a tragedy. But one of the good things that came out of it was it created a world that is fluent in Zoom. I
Mm.
mean, no matter it seems like every country knows how to use Zoom, and for especially for a lot of the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises that I deal with at the World Trade Center, this is this is a windfall. This is really because the problem with for small and medium-sized companies was always trying to find partners that you trust,
Mm.
uh, because the big guys can send people over and check them out, but the small guys, we always wondered. I remember years ago sending money overseas and wondering if I would see anything for it.
Right. Did I
But
just make a
now,
donation?
yes, and I have been very lucky. I haven't lost anything but now we can on a virtually a moment's notice, we can connect somebody on screen with a company in anywhere in the world, and it helps so much to see and talk to people. And then they can take their phone and they go and show them the equipment, they show them the product being made, they show them the boxes ready to ship. So you feel a heck of a lot better than sending money wondering.
Yeah, I love that. I I felt very comfortable with online meetings, so I had to do some before the pandemic started. But I love that you use the word fluent because we I remember getting to even just like family conversations where people who aren't in the business world, who haven't had to do that, all of a sudden it's like, oh, how do I, we're looking at someone's ceiling fan and someone else's forehead, and now you look at it a couple years later and everyone's just on board with it. And I love this idea that we can just connect with anybody anywhere in the world at any time.
Yes, and fluent in the early days of the pandemic, usually when we had online meetings, it was 5 or 10 minutes just to make it work.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now we're right on, and I also had some meetings I remember where people would have their unmade bed in the background, uh,
Hmm.
and it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that.
Right.
We can
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, for a while there, a couple of my friends and I were playing Zoom bingo, where you would, okay, did we see an unmade bed? Did we have someone walking around? How many ceiling fans or cats walking through did we see?
Right. I mean, sometimes it's fun to see, like,
Yeah.
I have a colleague with a dog that looks like a bear, and he would just
Oh,
walk back and forth behind her.
Yeah, that's it is fun when there's a little bit of photo bombing going on if it's, not too distracting and appropriate.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a wonderful thing that came out of, and of course, it's also I have daughters who travel and are in school away from home, and it's wonderful to I mean, it helps so much to see them, and that's just priceless.
Yeah. Now, how has this changed how business works when you can now interact across the world? I mean, you've worked for a long time with people all over the place.
Yes. Well, I think the biggest change is that um, I started doing trade back in the mid 80s, when my Japanese partner and I started. We had to borrow one of our clients' telex teletype machine
Okay.
in order to communicate real time with the U.S. And it was cumbersome and
Yeah.
awkward. And then the fax came out in the early 90s, and that helped a lot. But then, of course, the internet came. Now, all you need is a cell phone, and you can talk. Also, the expense. I remember paying telephone bills that were higher than my rent.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how it was. That was all the way into the 90s. Into the yeah, probably until 10 years ago. And now I pay zero, for calls around the world, like every night.
Right.
Um, and you've got, I mean, it's still a little complicated because you've got like Line for Japan, you've got WeChat for China, you've got WhatsApp for several countries. Everybody's got their own platform, and sometimes I see messages come in, and I'm like, where did that come in? Was that a text message? Was that an
Right.
email? Was that WhatsApp? Well, I mean, I know I saw a message. I have to
Yeah.
find it.
The closest I can relate to that is even just with all the technology. I don't deal with too many people internationally, but just all the different ways in which we are communicating, even domestically, where, I have some friends that I chat on Messenger and some on WhatsApp and some are
Yeah.
their texts or some are email. And sometimes people are messaging on both with the same relationship. I'm thinking, wait, where did we have this conversation?
Right. Didn't you say something like, well, where did you say that?
Yeah.
What platform?
Yeah. And then you go
Yeah,
to find it and it's like, oh, I'm searching in the wrong place.
right. Well, it's even more complicated with me, I think.
Oh, definitely. And you are fluent in how many languages? I just want to get that out there because
Well, I have to qualify. I don't tell Chinese or Japanese that I'm fluent because their standards for fluency are higher.
right, okay.
Here in America, fluent means like stringing one word after another without
Okay.
hesitation. And if that's the definition, then it's Japanese, Chinese, and English,
Okay.
and working. I'm still, there's other languages in process.
Excellent.
My uh, my Duolingo has so many languages on it that it's constantly bothering me. Hey, you haven't been around. What about Japanese? What about Korea? What about Vietnamese? Hey, how about Portuguese?
Oh wow.
It's but it's
That is
fun.
a lot to keep straight in your head. I have downloaded Duolingo and I think I'm on an 8 or 9 day streak since we met.
All
I
right,
downloaded it
great.
that day or the next day and I've gotten through several lessons. So
Well, I'm happy to have done that.
yeah, yeah, no, it's been great just to get refreshed and surprising how many things were familiar when I saw them again because I studied
Yeah,
fast and I wouldn't have been
yeah,
able to pull them out of thin air, but when I saw them, I was like, oh, wait, I know what that is, or
yeah.
they said
Your
it.
recognition is much better than production.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, Michael, you're here because the world wants to know how awkward you are and what your awkward thing is. So, what is that thing that's been awkward for you that you've had to own?
Well, for as long as I can remember, uh, I have not been up to date on television or music or um, events that most people know about. TV shows. I think I stopped watching TV, like Leave It to Beaver, or was it Andy Griffith?
Okay.
I talk about that. I know, or Flipper. I remember Flipper.
Right? King of the
Uh,
Sea.
yes, Lassie. I remember Lassie, but after that, I kind of checked out, and I'm interested in my own things that I have my passions that don't involve, pop culture, you might say.
Sure.
And so even sports, I before I go to Japan, I remember studying up on baseball because the Japanese know more about the Mariners than I do. And so I had to like find out how are they doing, what's the Japanese ball player, um, I had to study the Japanese ball players and
Uh,
everything before I go to Japan.
yeah, because they're expecting you to be the representative from this
Right.
area, not only America, but right here in Washington.
Yes, they know everything about it.
Wow. That
So,
that's intimidating. So how has that worked to your advantage when you are kind of stepping out of that culture?
I basically I still like just keep quiet, and I listen, and I don't participate very much. People will notice, but I think the advantage is that, I've just kind of let myself go off the deep end on things that I'm interested in.
Okay.
And I consider myself very fortunate in that my jobs are really related to the things that I've been interested in.
Sure.
Um, I remember having interim jobs um, in between West Point and the University of Hawaii. I had some jobs. Uh, well, I had an accident that I was recovering from, but I had jobs that involved everything from like elevator operating to parking cars, and my colleagues would talk about games and things
Oh,
like that.
sure.
Oh wow, wow. But in parked inside my white glove as an elevator operator, I had Chinese characters
Oh,
and Chinese poems that I was memorizing when nobody was around, and so I just kind of went off the deep end on that, and I still um, I'm very aware of international relations and what's going on every day and everywhere from Ukraine to the Pacific, South Pacific, and I keep up to date on all those things and the cultural aspects. And I probably listen to podcasts is another positive thing that has happened. I listen to dozens of podcasts a week, and it's amazing how specific these podcasts can be.
oh, sure.
And I'm just in. You can go off the deep end and
Mhm.
find all kinds of information, but I'm very thankful that my job is not disconnected from my interest. And so when we do business with China, Japan, Vietnam, India, it's all really interesting to me, and it kind of builds on things that I already understand.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like would it be safe to say that the pop culture things almost are a distraction from what you really prefer to be focusing on?
Yes, I mean I do find that one of the advantages of being so unexposed is that when I do watch a movie, it's like, wow, This is amazing.
Yeah,
Or when I do watch TV and I see a commercial, everyone is new.
oh
It's like, wow, that was funny. That was
right,
great. Did you see that? Yeah,
it's always a new joke.
yes, yes. So that's a benefit in that when I do manage to sit down and watch something, it's my threshold level for entertainment is at the floor.
Okay, I love it. So have you run into situations where that has caused challenges for you because there's a discussion going on and you're in the space of like, hey, how are the Mariners doing? And you're like, ah,
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I have. And usually, especially amongst my overseas counterparts, I get expressions like the Japanese will say, それは知らないのか? アメリカ人ですか?
are
You
you
don't
really
know that?
American?
You're
Oh yeah,
American?
yeah.
I get that all the time, but they forgive me, and on the other side, I probably know some things that they don't know
Sure.
about their own culture. That so it's okay. They're forgiving.
Now, you mentioned that your jobs line up with your interests, and I can't imagine that's by accident. I'd love to hear about how you created that situation.
Well, when well, first of all, uh, I did it by not taking advice. Um,
Mm,
when I went to West Point, everybody said just survive. Just survive. Plebe year is really tough, and but I was always interested in Chinese culture. And here I had the opportunity to take Chinese. Everybody said just don't do it because that's really time consuming and you won't survive. And
mm.
my parents begged me, don't do it, but I did it. And I did spend a lot of time, my weekends, friends were drinking beer, and I was out studying at the language lab. And I just really enjoyed it. And after a couple of years, I paid my own way to go to China
Wow.
in 1979, and came back, and I found what I want to do. And so, anyways, um, I didn't know why, but people said, "What are you going to do with it?" Uh, I've had people say, "Why are you studying Chinese?" I mean, it was at the time there was no future in it.
Mm,
It was just, your hobby. And I just figured, well, it's what I want to do. So I did it. So I started studying. And even I remember I ended up in University of Hawaii and there were no Chinese there. They're all Japanese. And my Japanese partner today said to me, why are you studying Chinese? Why are you studying Chinese? I was studying Chinese poetry
okay.
and classical Chinese, which is a different language than the vernacular.
Mm.
And he would help me with it because he learned it in high school. But then, uh, 20 years later, he says to me, "Oh, now I understand why you're studying Chinese." Like he assumed. I understood it because China was going to be an economic powerhouse where there was lots of business to be done, which is not why I studied it. That was my
Right.
last. I mean, I did not do it because of that. But ultimately, um, I studied international relations in Tokyo, and again because that was the first type of articles I read in the newspaper. That's why I chose international relations as a subject for my master's degree after Chinese as a bachelor's. And so I followed my interest rather than what was probably more practical. I probably should have got an MBA, but I still wanted to do international relations. So that was interesting. And I don't I'm not a professional like diplomat or professor of international relations, but nonetheless, my my work is involved with culture. I mean, business and communications and understanding culture is critical to doing international business. And so I'm very fortunate that, especially here in Tacoma, where probably 90% or more of our trade is with Asia, East Asia specific. So the Chinese, Japanese interest in Korea and Vietnam as well are all really right on. So I'm very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Someone would have thought, looking back, that you had this magical foresight to, how things would develop, and you were just forward thinking.
Well, I did have a lunch with my mentor in graduate school, and I asked him, I said, should I study Japanese or should I study Chinese? Which one should I? And he says to me, why not do both? He said, and sometimes I think, oh gee, if I had done like Chinese, my Chinese would be so much better. If I had just focused on Japanese, my Japanese would have been so much better. But I'm glad I did both because it's just more broad. I think there's some also comparative culture, which is what I studied. Japanese and Chinese, from the distant perspective of an American, they're almost like, oh, they're the same, but they're very different. Very, very different. As different as, say, the British and the French.
Okay, wow.
Or the French and the Italians, or the French and the Germans. I mean, they're from the perspective of an Asian, they may say, well, they're Europeans,
right.
They're the same. But they're very different, and yet it's also true there are similarities. There are lots of similarities as well.
Yeah, wow. I love that your mentor gave you the answer of why not both, because it's so easy to get caught up in what's the best route and what's the best path. And when we do that, we end up closing doors that we might want to leave open.
Yes. And I think in today's world, there's a value like never before in breadth of understanding, because we get so specialized. Oftentimes we end up down one route, and young people, I always advise them, keep broad, do a lot of things, experience a lot of things. And I think some people out in the business world, we were meeting with Vietnam National University. We had brought the dean of the Milgard School of Business with us in Vietnam, and we had in our delegation an engineer, and the dean of a dean at Vietnam National University, huge university, 70,000 students, said he was doing economics. That was his thing. And he said, we love engineers who study economics because they understand models. They know the models, because apparently it's very mechanical, and you can understand models. If you're an engineer and you're studying economics, you understand models. I said, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Wow. That's this idea of staying general and is so important, because the world gets so focused, like you said, on specialists, that we then it can really alienate people who don't feel like they have a specialty. You look at that idea of being a jack of all trades and master of none, and yet there's a place for that, and there's a place for that to actually be very rewarding for a person if they don't feel like, oh, yes, I can't commit to this or this, and then we feel like I'm nothing because I don't have a title or an interest put behind my name, rather than just saying I'm an explorer, I'm an adventurer, I'm doing all these things, and that's what's very rewarding.
And life is long enough that you can do more than one thing. At the same time, I have daughters who are college age, And at the same time, the parents, I feel for them and understand their wanting an education that you can sink your teeth into,
Right.
with a solid skill coming out
Helps
of
you
it.
sleep well at night.
Yes, and that I understand too. And so I'm definitely not opposed to uh, paying for an education where you're going to come out with a skill,
Right.
because skills are important. And yeah, so I have to a
I think
language, a language or a professional skill is really valuable too.
yeah, I think it's just important to remember there's a place for both. You don't want your brain surgeon to be too much of a generalist.
Right.
Like, I do this on the weekends. Let's see how this goes.
Talking to you about pop culture as he's getting ready to
Exactly.
thing
Like,
to
did you see
open.
the latest movie? Right. Yeah. So I do want to come back to you. You talked about the big key to your career path has been ignoring everyone's advice and not taking that advice early on, and just going against the grain. How was that while you were in those moments, those early years? Did you get a lot of pushback, a lot of pressure from people to be like, hey, get on this path or go this direction?
Yeah. Yes, I did. Uh, I did, and it scared me, frankly. I often thought, "What am I doing?" And you always have nightmarish visions of uh, being uh, hungry and uh, studying flashcards. Uh,
Right.
can't eat them, but so yes, definitely there are times along the way when I really wondered, and I think it's pretty normal. Um, but at the same time, there have been times when I really have to be thankful. Like, wow, that was really cool.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, we had two delegations come in at the same time, our two sister cities, one from China and one from Japan. And we had an event at which they were sitting at the same table,
Uh,
nonetheless. People who understand international relations and history know that's not an easy feat.
yeah.
And yet I was able to address them both in their language. And it was
Wow.
wonderful. I was like, wow, my two cultures that I love
Right.
together. That was really wonderful.
Yeah, I imagine it's like when you have two grade school friends that went sideways at one point and you have friendships with both. And you're like, can we get in the same room and enjoy a meal together?
Yes, yes, it was just like that, just like that. Um,
So how did you push through those moments where you're having the nightmares about the flashcards and thinking, am I doing the right thing?
yeah. Well, usually those moments happen when you're tired,
Okay.
and when you're tired or you have low blood sugar or whatever, you're having a challenging time, and I think the best thing to remember is, it I oftentimes tell myself it's going to work out. It's going to work out. Things will be just fine. I'll get it done. It's going to work out,
Right.
and it does. It does. But self reassuring maybe is the thing that has helped me a lot. Is it'll work out, Mike. Don't worry about it. It's gonna work out. And yeah, I kind of um, try to sense that um, we there are powers out there, or maybe call it subconscious that is helping in the background, and it'll take care. Don't worry.
Yeah. I sometimes have to remind myself that I can envision all the negative things. I can paint all those pictures of what could go wrong, but I
Yes.
forget that there's so many things that could go right that I'm not doing disaster preparedness around all the things that could go right. So it's like, wait, there's just as much or more positive things that could happen as what I'm catastrophizing in my head.
Yes. And the way life is, I think, is that we create, and we are around us are a lot of supporting structures that we're not always consciously aware of. We're not in this alone.
Mm-hmm.
I like, if you went out into the street and sat down and were hungry, somebody would come by and put food in your mouth.
Right. Right.
Likely.
I hear you there. So before we get to the last couple questions, you've got your hands in a few different things with local business, international things, both with being a principal at Asia Access Inc. and with the Trade Center. What is the best way for people who are listening to really be supportive, to get behind what you're doing out there and jump on board?
Well, I think it's we're in a new era where just about anybody, if they really would like to engage in international business, they can do it. And I'm happy to share my experiences, just, whether it be a call or a Zoom call or a visit to my office. I'd be very happy to help with this kind of thing. Also, I think here in America, we tend to not have to go expand our horizons, and yeah, I'm a board member on the World Affairs Council Tacoma. I'm very happy, very proud of that. And at the World Affairs Council Tacoma, what we do is we bring in people who have gone places, amazing places, and they come back and tell us about it. But it expands our horizon, and I would challenge the audience to take a trip, go somewhere if you can, or whether it's domestic, maybe in the U.S., maybe it's somewhere within 100 miles, maybe it's on the other side of the world if you can swing that, but stretch our boundaries a little bit. And I know that's for me, having gone to China at 19 years old. It was life-changing. And I encourage young people, especially before they get married and have kids and have responsibilities, just do it, just go, and anyways, I'm really supportive of that and happy. In fact, after this podcast, I have a call with a young college student who's interested in international, and so I'm going to tell him about my experience, and I'm hopeful it might be helpful to him.
Well, one thing that I think is so neat about what you just shared about pushing our boundaries is that that you point out there's ways that we can do that. It doesn't have to be, if you can't afford to take a trip around the world, even just as simple as going to a restaurant in a neighborhood in your town that you never would go to. Like, just take at least one step out of your comfort zone and experience a little different culture.
Good point. Here in the U.S., it's not so necessary, and even when we go abroad, sometimes it's not that necessary. People can stay in their travel group and not get outside it. But with there are resources out there, like free of charge, just like we talked about Duolingo.
Yeah.
I mean, there are resources out there that allows you to expand and explore, and call the World Trade Center. I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's interested in right now I'm still Asia heavy, but recently I've been going to Europe, and sometimes we go to trade shows and things over in Italy, and I'm fascinated by by Europe now because I focus so much on Asia.
Yeah, this is a whole expansion for you now to experience
Yes.
different cultures. That's one thing that's interesting perspective to think about too, is we can immerse ourselves getting to know a different culture, and yet there's so many others that we can still learn about.
Yep. Yep. And even one culture, I mean, going deep into one, China, for example. I mean, I could study China all my life and feel like I've just scratched the surface.
Right.
They they have a saying, 活到老，学到老，还有3分学不到. You can live into old age, and yet there's 30% that you will never know. And if you study till old age, you live to old age, you'll still 30%. Well, the reality is there's 99% you will never know.
Right. Yeah, there is so much. And that can both be overwhelming and rewarding, right? To know that there's so much that we can continue to explore, and yet it can also be daunting and oh my
Yeah.
gosh, will I ever, I mean, projects can be like that. Like there's so much to do that will I ever get through this? But
Right.
yeah.
Right. Right.
Well,
Well,
Michael, before we go, I'm curious if there's anything else you want to make sure we share, and then I'm going to ask you for something you challenge our audience on.
share. Well, share I can't tell you the latest cool songs or the latest. Hey, I'm going to see Barbie tonight.
Are you? Wow.
Yes, yes, and that's my daughter bought me a ticket, so that's going to be interesting.
That has
Um,
to make it even more fun for her knowing that you don't go to things
yes,
much. It makes it an even bigger deal.
but this sounds interesting. I mean, from what I found out, it sounds interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. Now,
So
a
Barbie is
challenge,
based on a doll that a lot of American kids played with.
right?
Just kidding.
Right. And I remember, I mean, and apparently the doll in the early 60s stretched boundaries,
Yeah,
and a very positive force. And then apparently like it kind of backfired a little bit with the rigidity of the looks and the
right.
model that it was projecting. And then I remember there was a period during which like suddenly there were all types of Barbies, and even in Japan there was a Barbie more cute with big
Oh,
eyes and a cute, more like a cute Barbie.
no,
All
funny.
this, and but now I've heard it's it's bringing up social questions and things that are pretty interesting. So
Yeah,
I'm looking
it's a
forward
worthy
to that.
conversation. Yeah,
Looking forward to that.
definitely. Well, how would you challenge people who are listening on how they can own their awkward?
Well, I think when you have an awkward, it typically is seen as a short suit. But in cards, when you have a short suit, usually you have a long suit too.
Mm,
And so look for the long suit. Look for the long suit and play it. Um, I think that I think that's one thing. And what is the long suit, and what can you do with it
mhm.
to contribute? What contribution can you make with it? Is the question, because that I think is where ultimately satisfaction in life comes from.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
ask that question. If I have a short suit, then what's the long suit? Because there's always one. Um, and what can I do with it? How can I contribute with it, using it?
Yeah,
Uh,
I love that you mentioned that bringing that contribution is where we have the satisfaction. And when we feel valued and when we feel like we're contributing, that's the most rewarding thing that I've ever experienced. And from people that I talk to, and I talk to so many, that's the underwriting theme.
right. Yeah. And go to a restaurant in your neighborhood that you haven't been to. go to a country or a part of the state that is unfamiliar to you. Learn a language that you used to know and you want to dust it off, or a new one. I mean, these are challenges that I think are worthy too.
I agree. Well, I've been enjoying that challenge because you gave it to me a week ago, and it's already been rewarding. So thank you so much for being here today and for everything that you're doing to help relations and grow business around the world.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I'm going to watch all of your podcasts. That's my challenge. I look forward to that.
Hey, I love that challenge. So thank you so much. And
Very good.
everybody else, be sure you go out there this week. And as always, own your awkward.
Thank you so much for listening in for today's show. Be sure to visit awkwardcareer.com to continue your journey. And of course, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so they can find their awkward side and learn how to own it.